All right, so quick intro. So I'm Doug Ewan. I've been working with WordPress since '08, and I went full-time with my business in 2009. I do WordPress design, development, and maintenance. I've spoken at various WordCamps and Meetups, and I am a former Portland resident, former co-organizer of the Meetup, but I'm currently living in Hilo, Hawaii. And I'll put the slides, a link to the slides in the Meetup comments after the Meetup ends. And as Doug Ryder said, we'll have the video hopefully later this week. All right, so here's a basic outline of what I'll be talking about. And I'm going to try to stop for questions at the end of each of these sections. So it's going to start off with why upgrade PHP, and then I'll talk about the different PHP versions, and then preventing errors, and then testing for errors, and then fixing errors. So those last three, there's going to be, I guess, a little bit of overlap because you're going to want to test and fix things like on a staging site or a local site. And then, you might go back and forth between them. So it's not in a set order there. Okay, first off, why upgrade PHP? So probably the biggest thing that there seems to be an improvement in every version is speed. And then there's also security. Older versions will stop being supported, so you don't want to be stuck on an old version. There are also new features, and if you're not a developer, you may not see necessarily the advantage of these, but some plugins can take advantage of them or themes. And the other big one is compatibility with other software. So if you're on an old version of PHP, you may not be able to upgrade WordPress core themes and plugins, or your site could break if you upgrade them and they're not compatible with old versions of PHP. Similarly, if you install new software, that may not be compatible with an old version of PHP. Now, WordPress core, they try to do backwards compatibility for a lot. I think it's something to like back to PHP 5.2 or something like that. But I wouldn't count on backwards compatibility for too far. You shouldn't be that far behind. And then the other good reason is because you have to. So some hosts are going to force it, and this is maybe a little subjective, but I think most good hosts are going to make the PHP update for 8.0 mandatory before November 28th. So November 28th is the date when security support for PHP 7.4 ends. And at that point, PHP 7.4 is considered not secure. Now, on that day, it's not like all the sites using an old version of PHP are going to get hacked simultaneously. Most likely, any major security bugs have been discovered and fixed by now, because it's been almost 3 years. But still, you don't want to stay on an old version, and the host may force it. So you don't want to wait for them to force it, because at that point you don't have a choice to go back to the previous version. And if you're troubleshooting, it's better to have a choice so you can go back to an earlier version and test things, and maybe see your plugin settings instead of on the new version you can't even get to those plugin settings. So another thing I heard, and I'm forgetting where I heard it, but somebody said that some hosts can mess up the PHP 8.0 settings, so you do have to be cautious with that. And I think they were talking about some lower quality, cheaper hosts that were having problems with that. Okay, and then the worst case scenario, I think, is if you choose to ignore this, or your host doesn't tell you, this could upgrade PHP without telling you, and your site could go down. And if you don't have uptime monitoring, you may not even know about it for a while. So that's, a pretty bad case, especially if you have your business website on there. And so my experience so far in testing and upgrading PHP, I have 26 websites of my own and clients on PHP 8.0. And I think these numbers are right, but I didn't track all of them when I started doing this. So it should be pretty close though. So 21 of them didn't have any issues, and 5 of them had some issues that I was able to fix. And then there's another 10 that I had tested with PHP 8.0, and they're not ready to upgrade. There's still some issues like plugins that are not compatible. The client isn't ready to switch over to another plugin. So that's 36 websites, and 15 of them had issues. 5 of them that I fixed, 10 that aren't fixed yet. So that's roughly 42%. And this is, obviously a very small sample compared to the number of WordPress sites out there, but 42% I think is a pretty significant percentage that, you should be concerned about. That's, it's not a rarity that your site is might have a problem with the PHP upgrade. So anyway, of those, 11 of them were with abandoned or abandoned plugins or expired premium licenses, where the client didn't upgrade, or possibly the premium plugin could have been abandoned and there just isn't actually an update available. Then there were 3 with incompatible themes, themes that were have not been upgraded. One of them was one of those 3 also had an expired premium plugin, so that's why these 3 bullet points add up to 16 instead of 15. And then 2 of them had custom code that needed to be updated. So those were things in like the functions.php that I had added or that were inherited from the previous developer. And so those were pretty easy fixes. All right, so any questions so far?
Yeah, just real quick here. So the ones that you fixed, were they all specific to just updates, or were they specific to a particular thing that you had to actually go back to the developer and ask them to do that?
They were, you mean so yeah, they were things that I fixed.
Okay.
There was the custom code, obviously there's no other developer to go to, and yes, so I'll show you like with the theme. One of them was Aspire Pro, which is a Genesis child theme, and that was an easy fix. It's one of the plugins or themes that they're no longer officially supporting. Okay, so yeah, so someone asked Ron asked how might we know if a host has messed up settings for PHP 8.x? That I'm not really sure. I guess if your site is really slow or it's broken. So that's why, and I'll get to this later, it's important that you be able to downgrade if something is wrong. And I also think it's important to try to test this stuff as soon as possible so you don't get to the point where the host won't let you downgrade. And then the settings, I think that's going to be, I think there's a php.ini if you have control over your PHP settings in your host. Anything other than the ini. I guess it would depend on the host. If they probably have their own configuration. Like I know with Cloudways, and they have their server control panel, and there's things you can tweak in there. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Yep. So I do have I do use some Genesis themes that I have in the past. And you said the Aspire Pro was one that had a glitch with it. What was
Yep.
the glitch?
There was a WooCommerce function that it came up with an error, and because that client wasn't using WooCommerce, all I did was comment it out, so I didn't have to actually fix anything. So that was a pretty easy fix.
Okay.
Hang on.
So I have a question. So
Yep.
you're talking about premium plugins. So I have some clients who have like a premium plugin, which some previous developer set up for them, but didn't give them the logins or anything. So they have no updates.
Oh yeah.
What do I do with those kinds of things?
The easiest thing would probably be to ask your client to buy a new license and, have them own that account. Maybe you could try to help them set it up, but you don't want, or at least in my opinion, like I try to avoid holding licenses for clients. If it's like a one, if that's the only one, if there's plugins with a developer license where I can use it on a lot of sites, and there's a big pricing advantage to doing that, then I usually just use my own license for those. But if it's like that's the only client that's going to be using that, I'd say have them get their own license. The only one downside though is they may forget to renew it, or their credit card could expire. This kind of thing happens with my clients all the time. And yeah, so you may have to remind them once in a while if you notice.
Yeah, I seem to get the clients who had somebody who they don't talk to anymore.
Yep. Yeah, it's common.
You know those. So
Yeah.
that's probably why they don't have the license. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things actually, I'll try not to go too much off on a tangent. But when I get a new client, I'll look at the plugins they have, and then with any premium ones, I'll see if they have an active license, and I'll try to ask them about it. And I think often a lot of times these premium plugins don't notify you that there's an upgrade, and they rely on emailing the customer. And in cases like that, if they didn't buy the original license and they don't know that they need an upgrade, or they don't know that they even need to pay for
it. Okay, that makes sense.
So, okay, I think I saw Marianne raise.
Yes, I raised my hand. Which specific plugins had problems with it?
So they were all old plugins. So there's one called Tippity, I think. There was a related post by Samantha. There were a couple other obscure ones that I didn't install and I don't use on any other sites. So I didn't remember all those, but most of them were like, 5+ years without an update.
Okay, well, that's actually a good sign that if it's a obscure plugins that you don't use often, that's better than finding out it's something you use on a lot of sites.
Yeah, well, I think there's also the popular plugins. They want to stay popular, so they're more likely to keep up with it. But if as a plugin author myself, when you don't see a whole lot of downloads, and you don't get and you're not making any money off the plugin, it's hard to go back and make it compatible with every new version. So those are the ones that I think tend to slip through the cracks. Okay, and then let's see what else. So yeah, I'm gonna go through some troubleshooting stuff.
Yes.
It's not going to be, it can't really be comprehensive because there's so many different problems that could happen. But for most of the time, I just try to get rid of the plugin because it's usually a plugin. Okay.
So Ron had a question. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Divi. So I have a client on Divi that I upgraded to PHP 8, and we didn't see any issues. 8.0,
thank
that
you.
is.
Thank you so much.
Yep. But you know, this is just what we saw. There's it's possible there could be issues on the site we didn't see, or features that you're using. So make sure to check a variety of pages on your site.
Nice. What about Generate Press?
That
Sure.
has been fine. I've only upgraded a couple of sites with that so far, but I haven't
Nice.
had any issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think popular, things that are really popular, if they've been putting out updates, there's a pretty good chance it'll be compatible.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Yeah.
Especially if they're making money off of it.
Yes.
They'd be foolish if they didn't.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So Robert says Elementor and Elementor Pro seem fine. Yep. Okay. All right. Shall we go on?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So PHP versions. This chart is from the WordPress.org site, and I think it was roughly 93% that were on 7.4 and lower when I had posted the description of this meetup, and it has that's gone down by like 0.5% since then. So, people are slowly upgrading to 8.0 and 8.1. Okay, so the currently supported PHP versions, 7.4.30, 8.0.21, and 8.1.8. So that third number is the point release, and usually you never see this. At least I haven't seen it when choosing to upgrade PHP. I think the host usually does it automatically. So the major and minor, sorry, chat. Okay. I get distracted if I see the chat notifications come up. All right. So, okay. So in these numbers, the 7 and 8 are the major versions, and then the minor are, the 0.4, 0.0, 0.1. So in some ways, it's similar to WordPress core in that the third number is very unlikely to break anything, and you should probably set it to upgrade automatically if you don't already. But it's like WordPress core in that when you go from 7.4 to 8.0, that's usually a big jump. Whereas with WordPress, like 5.9 to 6.0 wasn't a massive game changer. They always go 0.1, and they don't jump they're not going to jump from 6.5 up to 7.0 with WordPress. Okay.
Yeah, Doug, I'm just kind of amazed at the number of 7.4 and below are still active.
Yep. Yeah.
That is.
So 7.4, I guess that's not too surprising.
Yeah.
It is weird that it's, it's more than half, but I think most people are passive about upgrading, that they're going to wait for the host to do it, or maybe the host won't do it at all, which I think is how somehow you end up with all these lower versions, which is about so 37.2% on 7.3 and lower. And so those are all considered insecure versions.
So, I mean, if the host hasn't updated those, they're not going to update anything else ever.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So
I have a client who I've moved almost all but one of his sites over to Kinsta, but he has a dedicated server, and he didn't have someone on call, working on it. So the other PHP versions weren't even installed. So 8.0 wasn't even installed. So anyway, I decided to convince him to move over and not have to try to find somebody to manage the server, because I didn't want that responsibility. Okay, so so yeah, so you can see these, the versions, and yeah, just because, you know, most of the WordPress sites are on 7.4 and lower doesn't mean so. So I'm going to ignore the chat just so I'm not going crazy, going back and forth. So if you have questions, then when I stop at those points, then feel free to ask them. I'm just not going to be able to concentrate if I go back and forth. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so there's a new major or minor version approximately once per year. It seems like the PHP people are following this path. And then there's end of life or EOL after 2 years, and then there's support until 3 years. And so it's a bit of a weird choice of terminology because it's still supported for a year after end of life. And so this means there's usually 3 supported versions at any given time. And there's a couple of places where you can see this. This is a table that shows it's you know, since, let's see, 7.0, they've had you know, it's around the end of November, early December when they've had release dates. So it seems to be pretty consistent. Hopefully they'll keep with that pattern. And as you can see, the top 3 are the active versions, and security support for 7.4 ends November 28th of this year. And then there's another chart here, which might be easier to look at depending on how you like to view data. And it shows where we are right now in the calendar view. And it's, you know, as you can see, 7.4, you have a little bit of time, you know, to the right of the red dots, red dotted line. And there's three active versions at each time. If you think of, you know, if you look at the stairs, so to speak. So what I usually try to do, go to the next one. I usually try to shoot for the middle version because it's been out for at least a year, and that means that there's been enough time for the developers to make it compatible. And then if you want to shoot for the latest version, it's a bit risky. It may have conflicts because it hasn't been out that long, and depending on how many plugins you have, especially, you know, the more plugins you have, probably the higher chance that one or more of them are not going to be compatible. So that's why I like to do it, to wait at least a year. And let's see. So things that the developers need to do is update their code with function names and then syntax rules and stuff like that. And also, the more complicated plugins obviously take more time because there might be more things that they need to fix. So don't expect compatibility right away with the newest version. I think, you know, my rule of thumb with WordPress core is to usually wait 2 weeks after the upgrade of a major or minor version. A major version to let them work out the bugs. And then with PHP, I usually do, I prefer a year. You can, if you have a way to test it, you can of course test it early if you want, but you may be wasting your time. And then how to check your PHP version. So inside your host control panel, it's going to vary by host, but I think in cPanel, there's like a PHP. It's been a while since I looked at cPanel, or I don't do it too often, so I can't remember. I think it's like PHP Manager or something like that. And then you can also check it inside your WordPress site, and you go to your tools and site help menu. And there's a tab called info, and then there's an accordion called server. And then you also want to, while you're there, you might as well check your MySQL. If you have a dedicated server or a VPS, you might be able to actually change your MySQL version. But you want to, officially, you're supposed to be on 5.7 or higher, or if you're on MariaDB, 10.3 or higher. And so here's a screenshot of what it looks like in the backend. As you can see, PHP version 8.0.14, and the database is 10.3.34 MariaDB. And then to actually change your PHP version, it depends on your host. Like a lot of these things, it all depends. So this screenshot in the lower right is from Kinsta, and it's just a drop down. At cPanel, I believe, is something very similar, where you just have a drop down and you choose the version. You may have to wait a couple minutes for the update to take place. So the other thing is that depending on the host, it might apply to all the sites in your account. If you have cPanel, if you have separate cPanels for different sites, then I think you can change it by site. But if you have multiple sites added to the same cPanel, I think it's going to affect all of them at once. And in some cases, you might have to contact your host to do the upgrade. For example, Flywheel, they don't have an option. So when I want to do it on Flywheel, I'm going to have to reach out to them to do it. All right, questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. You mentioned about MariaDB. That doesn't really have anything to do with the PHP at all, does it?
No, I just mentioned it because it's right underneath when you go to the server
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
tab. Yep.
I have a
All right.
quick question too. Let me remember what was, okay. So when you are updating, you recommend going to the middle. So we should like update to 8.0.21, not update all the way to 8.1.8, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend 0.1, and you don't have to say the last the last number.
Okay.
So 8.0 right now, I think is the ideal choice because it's going to be out of date in a few months. And then 8.1, there's a good chance something is going to break on there. WordPress core might not even be officially compatible. I haven't checked.
So I had another question regarding that. So there's a 2-year window in which they will support their PHP versions, and then there's an additional, they say end of life, but they'll continue supporting it for another year after that. Is that standard from all of their PHP versions? It looked like it when you went to that chart.
I think so. Yeah, as let's jump back. Or at least since 5.6, I think that's when they separated those two, where it's just, I think they just use security support, meaning they may not do like bug fixes, and I'm sure they don't do any kind of new features.
Mhm.
So honestly, I'm not sure how much they do at that point. My guess is that if it's been out for 2 years, in that first 2 years, they're probably going to find most of the security issues anyway.
Okay, thanks.
I'm running all 3 versions on VPSs on my local development machine. And just today, all 3 versions had updates, including 7.4. So apparently there were some security updates just today that were pushed.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, good to know. Let's see. All right, I'll try to look at the chat.
So I had a question. So you're
Yep.
talking about like, if you're updating it and you have multiple sites under the same cPanel, like that could be, I'm kind of concerned because if if I'm trying to do one and maybe the other one has some older stuff on it, I need to maybe, is there a way to stop that? Or do I need to actually go and make sure all of them are totally updated, like plugins and all that before I can update any of them?
Yeah, I would, and I'll go into some options for testing, but I would try to make sure they're all up to date or all compatible before changing it if it's live.
Well, and it'll depend upon your host. Some hosts
Yeah.
will let you pick and choose. Some of them are all or nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Another option if you're using cPanel is if you have the ability to make other accounts, you might want to move sites into separate cPanels if you want more granular control like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking I have some clients who maybe have like a site they're not really doing much with. It's kind of just there and it's not updated, where they have the current active site, right? So that one's all updated, but to go back and do the other one might be a lot of work, right?
Yeah. So you'll want to see how it's set up because if you might have the ability to change it per site, but there is a chance you might be able to change it for the whole account.
Okay.
And if you're in a situation where you put like 10, 20, 50 websites in one cPanel and you don't have the option to change them separately, that's when it's risky because if you test it live, and I know I'm going to tell you don't test it live, but I know a lot of people are going to do it anyway. If you're testing one site live, you can refresh it, and if it breaks, you can go change it back, and maybe it's only like a minute or a couple minutes when visitors might see the site down. But if it's 50 and you have to try to test all those at once, it's a longer period of time when the sites could be down.
Yeah, I'd like to hear how you do the testing, and that would be interesting.
Yep. Let's see. All right. Any other questions before I move on?
I'm sorry, I joined late. So how bad is 7.4?
How bad? I mean, it works for now. It's not insecure, but it's in November, your host may force you to do the upgrade because they're not going to be doing security updates after that.
Okay.
So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
8.0 is faster than 7.4, and 8.1 is even faster than 8.0. So, if you're looking for positives, then there's that, and you're going to have to upgrade PHP anyway. So I say try not to stay on old versions.
So when is 8.1, did you say that's beta or is?
It's officially out and supported. It's just that a lot of plugins are probably not yet compatible. I did some tests earlier this year, and things were breaking, and I didn't dig too deep into it, but it had. I think I was testing in probably January or February, and it had only come out in November. So it's pretty unlikely that WordPress core and your theme and all your plugins, that they're all compatible with the newest version within 3 months. So again, that's why I say try to wait. I like to wait a year. It's just in terms of numbers, it's easy to remember.
Okay.
And then once a year, upgrade your PHP version.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So I mean, but like the more popular plugins like Elementor and stuff like that, they should probably be compatible with 8.1, you think, or not really?
Sorry, could you say that again?
So the more popular plugins like Elementor, should they be compatible?
Yeah, there's obviously there's a guarantee, but if a plugin is popular, if it's being regularly updated, and especially if they're making any money off of it, you have a pretty good chance that it's going to be compatible. I'd say the ones that are usually the most problematic are they're free. They don't have a whole lot of downloads, and there's no, it's just usually it's something that somebody maybe developed as like a scratch your own itch thing to solve a problem that they had, and they decide to share it with everybody. And it's work to do these upgrades and to test, and they may have a job, they may have better things to do, and then they just abandon it.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna
I've got
move
one more
on.
question. If you like
Yep.
upgrade to like, let's say 8, and then your site breaks, then do you have
Yep.
to, you just go back to 7.4, or do you have to like use a full backup from the website?
You should be able to just go back down as long as it's available in the host. And usually if you have the ability to upgrade, you can downgrade. I think I've seen in some cases where, if it's like if you wait too late, like if you wait until after November 28th, for example, when 7.4 is no longer considered secure, then you may not be able to downgrade back to 7.4. And so I've seen this, I think a couple of times in hosting accounts where, when I'm going to change it, it says, with this one, you can't go back. So you should be able to go down, but obviously if it tells you you can't, then you know that you can't.
You can never go. Okay.
Yeah. So again, that's why I recommend trying to do this stuff earlier rather than later. Like right now, while you still have the chance to go back down to 7.4, if you need to troubleshoot. Some people, can, if you're a developer, you may be able to just fix it real quick and you don't need to downgrade. But other people, you may want more time, or you may want to be able to see that plugin active and see all your settings that you have on there. Because if you, I'm jumping forward in the presentation, but if you, how should I explain this? So the most common way to fix it, a plugin that breaks your site, is to just deactivate it. And when it's deactivated, then you can't see your settings. You would have to, go into the database and try to decode how those settings were stored. And that's a big pain. You don't want to do that if you don't have to. So if you have the ability to look at those settings, keep the website on PHP 7.4, like for example, the related posts plugin I had mentioned. There's not a whole lot of data in the plugin settings, but if I wanted to see that I have 5 related posts showing, and it's set to show thumbnails, then I'd be able to do that as long as I'm still on 7.4. Okay. Yeah, so Robert says, depends on what breaks, may be better to fix what's not working than to downgrade. Yep. It's also depending on your preference, I think, and how important the plugin is to you. A lot of times a plugin is not important at all, and you may just want to get rid of it. The other thing is, if you try to fix a plugin that's being abandoned, then you're probably going to have to keep fixing it for new versions, the next version of PHP. And that's probably not something you want to keep doing. All right, I'm going to move on now. Okay, so preventing errors, and this is kind of some general best practices. I try to do this ahead of time, and then hopefully you won't have as many errors to deal with. So like I mentioned, old plugins are the most common issue, and then old themes as well. So to check if a plugin is old, you can go to the View Details link in the Plugins menu. And for most plugins, I think, in the repository, it'll bring up the repository page for that plugin, and you can see the last updated. But some plugins customize that and they take you to their website instead. So you can also search the repository for that plugin name. And one thing to note is that the search won't work for plugins that are older than 2 years, I believe, or that haven't been updated in over 2 years. So if you don't see it come up in a search, then it's probably too old. Next thing to do is you can check the last modified date in SFTP in the files, but this isn't entirely accurate because this is just when it was last modified on your hosting account. So if the plugin was already 2 years old when you installed it, it looks like it was just, and you installed it yesterday, then it looks like it was last updated yesterday. And sometimes, like if you move hosts, that date last modified can get reset, and sometimes hosts can do things, and I don't know exactly what they do, but sometimes I've seen it get reset for no reason. Okay, and then yeah, so if a theme or plugin hasn't been updated in 2 or more years, it's still possible that it could work, but the likelihood goes down the older it is. If it's been 2 years, then PHP 8.0 might not have been out at the last update, so it might still be compatible, especially if it's a simple plugin. But it's still a good idea to get rid of plugins that are that old because they're unlikely to keep being updated. And similarly, or maybe not similarly, but in contrast, I should say, is that just because a theme or plugin was recently updated doesn't necessarily mean that it's compatible with PHP 8.0. They might not have tested it. I feel that usually it's the case that it's compatible, especially now when it's getting close to the 7.4 being deprecated, but it's not a guarantee. And your custom code is another thing. If you've added code, like if you've looked something up online and they say, oh, to do this, just add this snippet to your functions.php or add a code snippet that does this. That code is not being upgraded by anybody. If it was a plugin, there's that's somebody else that's responsible for that, and if it's it could be updated. But if you're putting in code, it might be an old source that you found it online, or it might have been from years ago and it needs to be updated. So if you put it in yourself, or if you've inherited a custom theme, you're going to be responsible for updating it. This is part of why, when I see people with, completely custom themes, or they've taken, a lot of times I've seen a client where the previous developer copied another theme and just renamed it so it won't get updates, and then they did a bunch of customizations instead of doing a child theme, which is the proper way to do it. And those situations are where you can get a lot of errors coming up because that can often be a lot of code behind it. So here's the related posts plugin that I had mentioned that's abandoned. And a little gripe that I have with the setup is that, as you can see, if you were on this page, you wouldn't. Well, I don't think you even can. Yeah, you can't even download if you wanted to. But if you have this plugin installed, you're never going to know that it's been closed and it's no longer available for download. So that's why I say, try to check on your plugins every once in a while. Maybe once a year, kind of do a little audit and look for plugins that have been abandoned or where the last updated, gets to 2 years, 3 years plus. And there's also you can also have this where, the plugin hasn't been closed, but it also hasn't been updated in many years. And again, you don't know that it hasn't been updated because you run all the updates that are available, but if it's abandoned, there just won't be any more updates. So this is, all part of prevention. I say try to get rid of the problematic stuff before it bites you. Okay. Oh, questions? Any questions? We move on to testing.
I was just
Nope.
going to say that you can use things like main WP or some of the other admin programs. They will watch out for you in terms of.
Hey, Eagle,
yeah.
is that, can you turn your mic up if you're talking?
Okay, well, I'll try to figure that out. Never mind.
I'm just going to mute Eagle for the moment. So, okay.
Okay. I think he was saying main WP and some other programs can tell you if plugins have been abandoned.
Is this any better?
It's still pretty quiet.
Yeah. You're pretty low on level there, Eagle.
All right, I'm going to move on
Okay.
to testing. So these are the my three top ways to test. And this is also, it's going to depend on your host. Staging is usually the easiest. It depends on your host if you're able to make a staging environment, and it depends if you change the PHP version on that staging environment. So in WP Engine and in Kinsta, I've been able to change the PHP version. In Flywheel, I can't, and I can't change it on the live version either. But one thing you can do is to make a staging site and turn on debug mode, and you can look for errors that come up that way. This is going to be before you upgrade to the next version of PHP, so it's not going to catch all of them, but and I'll get into it. I think it's in the next slide or the one after that, about the different errors that you may get. So basically, you can see some things that can come up as errors before they actually crash your site in the next PHP version. The next easiest is probably going to be cloning. And this, I guess, easy is subjective, but I feel that for somebody who's not a developer, this is probably the order of easiness. Okay, so so if you can clone the site to another server or another account on the same host, and if you're able to change the PHP version, and that's another way you can test for errors without impacting the live site, or going to a different host entirely. And then I haven't tested this yet. I meant to do it before this presentation, and I just got really busy. But Updraft clone, and there's probably services that allow you to clone your site into the cloud, so you don't actually need a hosting environment to copy it into. And so you could test the PHP 8 and future versions in there. So Updraft clone works on a token system where I think it's you pay one token to be able to use that site for 24 hours, and then you can pay a second token to keep it for a week, and then you buy a number of tokens or something like that. And if you have their premium plugin, then you get some tokens for free, I think. And then the local environment is maybe a little harder to set up, but you could do this. You should be able to do this regardless of your host. is to make a copy locally and then just change the PHP version there. And so localwp.com, and then desktop server, and the URL is WordPress.com. Or I think those are the two easiest methods for making a local environment. And then there's also MAMP, which I think is somewhat difficult to set up. And I think there's WAMP, and there's probably some other ones. But those are the two that I think are most recommended. All right.
So, is this any better?
Yep. Yes, much better.
Did
Back to
you
normal.
Oh, good. Did you say you couldn't change your PHP in local?
I think you can. It's been a while since I've used it, but I think you can.
Yeah. You can. I was just going to say. I just checked it.
Okay.
He said flywheel, not local.
Well, it's called local. The
I know
app.
it's the same company, yeah, but
The app is called Local WP now, or Local.
Yeah,
and it's
it
owned
used
by
to be called-
WP Engine.
Yeah, WP Engine. Yeah, so it used to be called Local by Flywheel, and then I think, when WP Engine took it over, they tried to get rid of the Flywheel.
But surely you
because
could
you can use
appeal
it
to
on any host.
WP Engine. If that's, I mean, surely they would change the PHP version for you, would they not? WP
Yeah,
Engine support?
Yeah, well, you can do it within the account, and you can do it on your staging and development environments with WP Engine. So if you're not comfortable making a local environment, you can just do it. You can do it there, and it's pretty quick. Actually, most cases have been pretty quick where I've done it. So if you need to change back, it's not like you have to wait an hour. I think, did I see Marianne?
I have a question.
Yep.
What is WP debug?
Yep. So that is, I think I have it. Yeah. So that'll be in the next slide. But
Okay.
it's basically turns on error messages, and you could have it show on the front end, which is fine if it's a staging site or a local site. But if it's a live site, you don't want those messages to display. So you can have them recorded in a log if you have to do it on live.
Okay. And then we did have a comment from Dean Sewer to everyone. And he said, just did a test on a new site, complete fail until I bypassed the CDN, contact delivery network. Clearing the cache was not enough. Re-enabling the CDN fixed it. 8.0 quick.cloud is a CDN. I suspect when the CDN re-enabled, it did more than flush command. I could execute manually. Then he says he has to jump off. So
Yep.
Do you have any comments on that?
So I haven't used that CDN. I haven't come across that issue, but that makes sense. Yeah, it's safe. To play it safe, you should turn off the CDN or clear it. And it helps to check. You could check your PHP version in the new copy of the site just to make sure that it's actually been updated to 8. So you would do that by going into the site health menu. All right, I will go on to the next slide. Okay, so the error log, and then there's this link which goes into more detail on how you can set it up. Some hosts actually have a button where you can turn it on. Kinsta has it. I think WP Engine has it too. I think Flywheel as well. But there's different options. And again, you want to be very careful about enabling it on the live site. And usually I don't recommend doing it unless the site is already down. But basically it'll show PHP errors, and I'll show some of those in the next screenshots. Okay, so some types of PHP errors. So I believe there's 4 main types. The fatal ones are the ones that basically crash the site entirely, and you probably don't see anything on your site. So there's been a critical error on this website, and then there's nothing else. So that's an example of a fatal error with WP debug off. And so those obviously are the worst, because there's nothing on your website to see at all. And then a parse or syntax error. I believe these will crash at the point that they occur. So I think you might see some of the site. There's a chance, but there's also a chance you might not see any of it. So the fatal and the parse ones are the bad ones. And then there's notices and warnings. And these, if you have debug off, you're not going to see them. They're not necessarily going to impact anything on your site. It may function normally, but they are an issue. And if they're not fixed, then the next version of PHP could break your site. So what I see a lot is deprecated warnings. And that's kind of a clue that it's, this code or this plugin is working now, but when you upgrade to the next version, it's not going to work. Next version of PHP. Okay, so this is, hopefully you haven't seen this too often, but I guess it's like it's not quite the white screen of death anymore. It's like the mostly gray screen of death. So not too helpful, but you're supposed to get an email when this happens. The email would go to the site admin. And if you're not, this is the email address listed in the general settings in the backend. And if you're working on this and it's somebody else's site and you're not the site admin, then you can actually define yourself to get the recovery email. And that I have a code snippet for that. But anyway, this is, it's kind of the worst error. It also doesn't tell you anything. And so this is the same site with WP debug turned on. And so this shows warning, deprecated, fatal error, and 2 notices. So the fatal error is related posts. This is the same plugin I brought up before. So I'm gonna pick on them some more. So that one, breaks the site entirely. Now, if I disabled that, or deactivated that plugin on this site, then it would load. If I kept debug on, then I'd still see these other error messages, but the site would otherwise work. Okay, and then the warning and deprecated, one of them is a plugin called Genesis Dam Buster. And that is, I believe it's over 2 years old, or 2 years since the last update. And that's used for making like full width pages in Genesis and changing some layout things. And then the next one is a plugin called Monarch, which is a social sharing plugin by Elegant Themes. And that one, the last update was April of last year. So again, this is it's a warning. So the plugin still works on 8.0. Both of those plugins, Genesis Dam Buster and Monarch, both still work, but don't put out updates. Then they're not going to work with PHP 8.1, most likely. And then the other notices, they're for those paths are in WP includes, so that's not too helpful. It's probably from another plugin or maybe and it's the error message is not it's calling like one part of the incompatibility, but it's probably not WordPress core. Okay, I think I saw a chat. The snippet. Are you asking for a recovery code email?
Yes, you said you had a snippet.
Yep, that is, oops, yep, right here. In wp-config.php, define recovery code email, and then you can set your own email address. So I've been this. I have to get even better at it, but I try to do this on client sites because, even if I set up staging and then I'm testing the upgrade, they'll get the error message, and then I have to send them an email. Don't panic. This isn't your live site. That's gone down. I'm just testing on staging, and then I'll remember to go into WP config and add this. Some people might put this on the live sites of their client. I can see the reasoning for doing that too. But I'm not sure if there's a way to set 2 emails. I think that would be ideal. On the live site, it's to set both, but I haven't looked into that. Okay, I don't think there was anything else on this screen. Okay, so before I go more into fixing errors,
Can you go back to if you could go back to the different kinds of errors? I have a quick question on that.
Yep.
There's fatal, parse syntax. I've had parse syntax errors before, and usually you have a line, exactly what plugin it is, and then you can just go fix it from there.
Yeah.
Notice no warnings. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yep. So you can usually find the plugin that's the offending plugin and probably the line. But actually fixing it, that's and there's so many different ways an error could happen.
Right.
But I'd say the important thing is that the most important thing is you can find the plugin, and if you're not a developer, the easiest thing to do is just get rid of that plugin and switch it for something that does the same thing. That's still being updated. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you want to delete, do you want to turn off all the caching before you do it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's better just to be safe. You should do that, or at least clear. Well, if you're using a plugin to do the caching, then you may want to just clear the cache after you've made the new site, because that plugin itself could have error, and if you just deactivate it, then you may not see that plugin has a problem. But yeah, it's a good idea to do that. Well, the other thing is if you have it set up where logged in users are not cached and you're logged in when testing, then if the plugin is working correctly, it shouldn't affect you because the caching should be turned off. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Just in general, when you're developing, you should have caching turned off because it'll mess with you.
Yep. Good point. All right. And then should be the final section. Okay, fixing errors. And before upgrading, I should say before upgrading live or troubleshooting live, you really want to make sure you have the following: hosting access, especially SFTP and database access, the ability to downgrade PHP, fresh backup, and a default theme installed. So SFTP is if you need to deactivate a plugin and you can't get into the backend, then you can do it by renaming the plugin folder. The database, you probably don't need to do it if it's a PHP issue, but it's a good idea always to have access to that if you're doing development. I mentioned you want to be able to downgrade PHP, and then fresh backup. So far, I haven't seen an issue where changing PHP back, like downgrading PHP, has broken the site, and I've needed to restore a backup. That hasn't happened, but it's still a good idea to keep a fresh backup. And then the theme. This is another one I haven't seen, but they say it's good practice to keep a default theme installed. And you actually, if you pay attention to the site health warnings in the backend, if you don't have a fallback theme, that comes up as a warning. So the idea of that is if the theme breaks, then you have another theme that the site falls back on. Okay, and then the recovery mode email, that's in the wp-config.php file. There's all sorts of interesting things you can do in wp-config. You could probably do an entire presentation on that. And the recovery mode email, if you're lucky and you've never seen this before, then that's good. But since I don't remember, a few versions of WordPress ago, they started doing this where you get an email with like a safe login link, where if your site is down, you see this this kind of critical error generic thing, and the whole site is down. Then you get an email with a link where you can still log into the site, and then you can disable or deactivate the plugin that's the problem, or do some other fixes. So that's the recovery mode email that you get. And I think I've usually gotten this, but I think there have been a couple of cases where I haven't gotten a recovery mode email when I've seen that critical error message. So I would say, don't rely on getting that email. Like if you have it, or if you get it, then that's great. You can get back into the site, but make sure you have other ways to get in, especially the file system and the hosting control panel. And then if you have to do this on a live site, well, this is both if you've tested it already on staging, local, or in the cloud. I still recommend you try to do it during low traffic hours to do it on a live site, even if you've tested it. If you're one of those people that is just going to go live, just change PHP live, then you especially want to do it during low traffic hours. And this depends on the site, depends on your preference. If you have a site that gets a couple hundred visits a month, then it's really not gonna be a big deal. I think if you do these things live, if there's a chance that there's one visitor that might see your site down, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're getting 100,000 visits a month, you probably don't want to be doing these things live. And then some other things when fixing errors. So this is a screenshot of some custom code that I fixed. And so this is from GitHub. So it shows the red or pink line is the old line of the code, and then the green one is the new version. So this was a syntax issue where in PHP 7.4 it allowed you to do this with no apostrophes or quotation marks, and then the fix was just to put the quotation marks in, and so that was an easy fix. And then so I mentioned before, you can deactivate your plugins in SFTP if you can't get to it in the plugins menu. So if you see the fatal error and you can't access the WordPress backend, then you go into your file system and then you rename the plugin folder. So another So one of the tips I have for doing that is I like to just put a dash in the beginning of the name. So this way it, if you have it sorted alphabetically, it'll go to the top and I can find it again easily. And you don't, if you do end up reactivating that plugin, it's best to keep the folder name the same. So you don't want to change it too much. Like you don't want to rename or change like the inside of the name, I guess. Like I would put, one character on the beginning or on the end. So there's very little chance that you rename it to something incorrect. Let's see, we've got some chat messages. If you do you prefer? Yeah, so I prefer the 2021 theme for a fallback theme to 2022 because 2022 is they have all the full site editing stuff. So I haven't used either one all that much, but I think because my client sites and my own sites are not on full site editing themes, that it's probably safer to have a non-full site editing theme as the fallback.
Yeah, and I think with 2022, it even disables the customizer because it's full site editing. And that can be a problem if your theme relies on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the Aspire Pro theme I'd mentioned earlier. This is a child theme of Genesis. And so they deprecated a lot of the child themes, but the other thing to note is that you can't upgrade their child themes in the WordPress dashboard. You can only upgrade Genesis. So this is maybe a unique case for the Genesis framework. But basically, we weren't getting updates to this theme anyway. Even if this was one of, I think, the 10 or 12 themes that they decided to keep developing, we still wouldn't be getting updates. We would have to go to the StudioPress dashboard and then download a new version and manually replace it. So anyway, the point of that is, it's a child theme that wasn't getting updated. So it's more subject to compatibility errors in the future because no one's still working on it. Similarly, if you made a fork of another theme, or if you had a developer make a custom theme for you and it's not getting updates, that's pretty common for themes to eventually have issues like this. Okay. So anyway, the error that came up on this site was with this add filter. It's right in the middle, and it's commented out. I don't seem to have my cursor showing up on the screen, but it's that line in the middle. Add filter loop shop per page, and basically it displays 30 products per page. I guess it just changes the default because it's a filter. So the fix for this was just to comment out this line because we're not using WooCommerce on this site. And if we were, then I would probably just change it. I could look up how to rewrite it to change the number of products displayed per page. Anyway, so that was an easy fix for this one. If you do have to fix custom code and it's code that you don't actually need, like in a theme, then the easiest thing to do is just comment it out. Then you don't have to look up how to fix it. Okay, and that's it. Any other questions?
Man, this is great, Doug. Thanks. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about having that default theme still in place. Is that in place and active, or is it just in place?
Just in place, just installed. You can only have one theme active at a given time. So yeah, I would just keep one installed. I think I don't know if they still do this, but they used to install one of the new default themes whenever it came out automatically. So you might have some of them in your site anyway. I would delete most of them except for one, because this is, again, a little bit of a tangent, but if you have 10 themes installed that you're not using, there is a chance that one of them could get hacked. And if that's 10 fewer sources of vulnerability, that's it's also 10 fewer things you have to do upgrades for when they. So again, I'd say keep one, and I recommend 2021. If you're not using full site editing, because it's the last of the default themes before that. All right.
The slide deck. Are you going to provide the slide deck too?
Yep, I'll put it in the comments on this meetup event.
Yeah, and send it to me too, so I can put it in the comments on the website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Your timing on this was good. I've been testing some stuff locally, but have been too lazy to actually do it for the real thing. So you lit a fire
Yeah.
in me.
Yeah. I figured it should be good, and I didn't want to wait too long. And like when people started getting emails from their hosts saying you have to upgrade or we're gonna do it for you.
Do a lot of the shared hosts only provide it on a server level and not on a individual website level as far as changing the PHP?
I'm trying to remember because I don't have. I think I have one. Yeah, I only have one client that's on. Oh, someone's saying something. Yeah, so I have one client, but they only have one site on there. And then there's another client that's using cPanel, but he's got a dedicated server, so his setup might be different.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's representative of other cPanels. But yeah, I think that's just something to keep an eye out on. I don't think there's probably too many people on here that have 20 or 50 sites in the cPanel.
No.
But
hope
yeah,
not.
one of the things I think with grid pane you can change it per site, right? Even if it's on the
Yes.
same
Yeah.
server.
Yeah. Yes.
So with Cloudways, I believe I can only change it on the server. So it's going to be all of them at once.
I don't remember on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, when I did it on Cloudways, I only had a few client sites on there and they were low traffic. So I just did. I guess you could consider it cowboy coding. I just went live and then I tested the ones that actually had traffic and they were fine. But if I had to do that, with some more significant sites, I would clone the whole server over and then upgrade PHP on the clone server to test those sites.
Most cPanels have a PHP setting in the cPanel that lets you update the PHP or downgrade it.
Yep. Oh, Brian's here. Yeah.
I have one
Thanks
thing.
for the shout out.
In SiteGround, everybody has their own. I could update the PHP in just one website at a time. It's all their own, so that's good. I won't mess up everything, just one.
It's apparently a big security hazard to have a lot of websites in the same cPanel. And that's kind of an older way that the less great hosts have been doing it. SiteGround, as you mentioned, Marianne, Yeah, they make a completely different, even if it's just a staging copy, it's a completely separate uh, sandbox. So it's really secure.
Mhm. So, Doug, I had one question in the recovery mode email that you said. If you're the site admin, do you get that same notification?
I think that code bit overrides the recovery code or the recovery email.
But I mean, if it's a fatal error, it's probably not going to go out, right?
It has most of the time, I think, but not all the time for me when I've been testing it. But there's also, I may have had email might have not been set up correctly, so it could have been emails not getting. It could have been like an email configuration issue too that was why they weren't getting sent. But
I should set up a site and break it and see if it does work that way.
Yeah. The only time I've had that happen where the email didn't go out was when the problem was in core itself, not in the theme or plugin.
Okay. Yeah. It's not. It's one of those things that's like it's nice to have, but I'm always wary if it's gonna work all the time. So it's like the auto updates. They say if something breaks your site, it'll undo it, but I don't trust that it'll do that.
Yeah.
But it's better than nothing. It's better than not having that option to begin with.
I left the site with all of its auto updates, all of its plugins set to auto update, and it came back a month later, and none of them had been running. There was no cron job or something. I'm not sure what the problem was.
Was it a low traffic site?
Yeah, a lot of my clients are.
That's probably it. Yeah, so it requires a visit to the site to trigger the next cron.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Event.
Yeah. It's one of the issues with Updraft Plus backups is that if you have a low traffic site, they don't back up. Yeah. It's interesting. I just got a job on a site that got migrated from an old server to a new server, and when the hosting company did that, they killed the site, and so they went in and they got it back up, but now there's a message at the top of the screen that says warning PHP. They turned on debug and forgot to turn it off. So I got this job and I go in and look, and the theme is 2 years old, and so I copied it to a staging site and updated the PHP just to see what was going to happen because they were warning about it. And sure enough, it killed the site immediately. And so now I got a job to rebuild the headers and the footers and switch to generate press. So
that's another good point that I just thought of when you're saying that is to make sure you turn debug off, because you can, if you turn it on and then you get rid of all the errors, it's easy to just think, okay, I'm done, but you forget to turn it off because then errors could come back up later. So just keep it on when you actually are actively debugging it, and again, preferably not on a live site.
Right.
Question, Doug's just, you mentioned cron jobs triggering stuff. Doesn't robots crawling the site trigger a cron job or no?
I used to think it does, and then like I think even if you ping the site with like an uptime checker, I don't think it works. So I think you need like an actual visit.
Yeah, cron only triggers on a get. It doesn't trigger on a head request.
Okay.
So
I do some of my uptime tracking by looking for keywords. So a particular word showing up, it might be the title of the site or something like that. So that would be a regular access. So that should do.
Yeah, most cron jobs though are just set up on a schedule, so at least
that I think there's a difference between WP cron though and the server side cron.
Gotcha.
The WP cron only gets triggered when in
the site
after a GET request, whereas the server side cron you can actually have it set on the schedule.
Okay,
that's one of the big advantages of installing the plugin WP Control. because then you offload the cron jobs from WordPress to the server.
Yeah, I use SiteGround for a lot of my clients, and they allow me to actually create cron scripts right from the site tools. And so that'll trigger it server side, then I never have to worry about it because these are very low traffic sites, and otherwise the crons, I can't rely on it.
And I
It's a good tip.
apologize. I had to jump off for a moment there for something else, but I did put in the chat that I'm in the midst of launching a pretty simple site, and I went and moved it. I run cPanel, and I moved it to PHP 8 from 7.4, and everything, critical error, all that stuff. And ultimately, I disabled plugins, still had the errors, so I disabled the CDN. Cleared the cache beforehand. That didn't solve it, but I disabled the CDN, re-enabled the CDN, and whatever gets flushed at that point. So, watch out for caches and CDNs, get back to a pure virgin site with nothing fancy, and before you panic.
And on the note of migrating is that some hosts, I think Kinsta and WP Engine are now doing this, is that any new sites you create are going to be on 8.0 by default. So if you are migrating a site on 7.4 or earlier, keep that in mind.
Well, one of the main reasons I'm rebuilding the site right now is that the host is DreamHost, and their documentation states very clearly that they only allow 3 PHP versions to be existent on the server. So the bottom one is 7.4 now, and the middle one is 8, and the top one is 8.1. And so the default is 8. And the way it reads is that 7.4 goes end of life in October. So they're going to deprecate PHP 7.4 in November 28th, and because that's the day that 8.2 comes out, and so 8.2 will be added to their stack. So at this host, 7.4 is gone by the end of this year, by December.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, that if you're on a site that is using 7.4, it's going end of life, and so depends on your host, but some hosts are going to knock it off.
Yeah, there's another plugin called Query Monitor, which I know a lot of people here know about, but it'll tell you if there's any errors that are going on in PHP.
Yep.
Usually they're deprecated or just the similar ones, but not the fail.
Actually, I think was it Eric that you were saying that actually that plugin was causing problems with PHP 8?
It did.
Yeah, there's a couple little quirks with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone? I think Eric, you said you were using 8.1, at least on some sites.
Yeah, I've got it on a couple.
Has anyone else been brave enough to try 8.1?
Not in production.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, so in theory, when 8.2 comes out, then 8.1 would have been out a year. But again, you have to kind of have that balance between you don't want to be on the old version going out, but you don't want to be if you're on the bleeding edge, it's just a higher chance of things breaking.
I've noticed some hosts have a switch for let the host manage the version of PHP, and that seems to be maybe the default setting, which you may.
That's the Hail Mary toggle.
Trust your host and don't mess with it.
Yeah.
You may encounter that.
Yeah, the problem is if they're going to tell you when they do it, like if they give you like a week notice, and then what happens if they do it? Like what happens if you go to bed at 11 p.m. and they do it at 11:01?
Oh, that's when you get a call from your client at 11:02.
Yeah.
Help.
That's why it's like I want to do it myself, when I have time to test it and turn it back.
But the thing is, some people, are not doing this all the time, and they actually probably should do it unmanaged because they may forget to go back every
Yeah.
3 years when they change the damn versions. So,
Yeah, but yeah, the downside is your site could just break.
yeah.
And if you're on a version that's insecure, for a week, that's probably not too bad, but your site being completely down and not knowing about it is probably worse.
Ooh, painful.
Yeah, that's the thing, is just if you don't know, or if you ignore the emails from your host, because I think a lot of my clients do that. I think they get these notices and they don't know what it means, so they ignore it.
I will say this, because I go through and update my clients' websites about every quarter, or maybe more frequently than that. And I think this is a pretty big update going to 8.0. But once you've done all this and you've fixed your plugins and everything is being maintained and the plugins are active, etc., when you go in to do 8.1 next year, it won't be as big a deal.
It shouldn't.
It should
Yeah.
come
No,
together.
8.1 is a bigger deal than 8.0.
Is it? Okay.
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, forget my previous statement on that.
However, the process of doing the testing will be familiar to you, so that part will be easier.
Yeah. The other thing is you don't is you don't know when they're going to jump to 9.0, because they went up to the 5 branch went up to 5.6, and then they skipped 6.0 altogether, but then it went to 7.0, but then 7 only went up to 7.4 before they jumped up to 8. So will we get up to 8.4, or 8.6, or is 8.2 going to be the last one and then it'll be 9.0? Who knows?
What is the name of the body that is creating these versions? And I'm sorry for such a dumb, ignorant question. Since I've been developing for 24 years, I should know.
It's a PHP foundation. It is a foundation.
I
now.
guess so.
Yeah, but who are they? Who are they really?
Well, Automatic has given them some money. I know that. But
They should. It's
yeah.
WordPress is based on.
It's good that they have a foundation. Up to last year, they really didn't. They only had a handful of people working on it, and there was one guy who left, and basically they always said he was the guy that knows most of what's going on with PHP. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking. I don't see like a normal about page.
Yeah.
They might be all anonymous.
Kind of scary.
Yeah.
So, so some people probably remember the 5.6 to 7.0 upgrade. So it's been a while since a big one like that. But yeah, I was hoping that 8.0 to 8.1 wouldn't be a big deal, but if Eric says it is, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that they're
another one.
I've heard that, and I haven't read all the details, but I heard that in 8 they've deprecated a lot of things, but in 8.1 they're just shutting them off.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So they're still working in 8.0, and you should get the warnings if you have debug on, right?
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. So another reason to test WP debug on this version.
The main thing that I see with 8.1 is that they're pretty much not concerning themselves with backwards compatibility. So testing will be mandatory for that one.
Yep.
Well, what's interesting is WordPress themselves has beta support for 8.0. And they're not even mentioning 8.1. They're talking about 8.2. There was an announcement last week, I think, or the week before, about 8.2. I had a client that was whining because his WP Engine account kept telling him, "Hey, you're not running 8.0 yet." So,
yeah. Three choices.
Okay.
Yeah, 8.0 recommended. That's good. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, some are still, I think Kinsta actually still says 7.4 is recommended.
Yeah, well,
But
Yeah.
I
Good
would
pane.
say 8.0.
yeah, grid pane is the default 7.4 when you spin up a site, but I just always bump it up to 8. You know, if it's a new site. I got a couple old ones, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've got like maybe a dozen more sites that I still need to test. And there are a bunch of plugins that I know are old on those. So yeah, so that 42% number of my sites that I've tested that had issues, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being over 50% by the time I'm done.
Mm.
It started off well. It started off at like 25%. And I did a few more, and it went up to like 33%. And then it was like, okay, it's 42%. But I mean, also I tested the sites that, you know, that were my own first, and, you know, they didn't have as many plugins, and I choose plugins more carefully than my clients. So, you know, that's part of it, but it's still surprising, you know, that number shouldn't be that high, that percentage.
Yeah. Mm.